Good morning to you, Lagos. Thank you very much for joining us here on Smooth 98.1. You're listening to Freshly Pressed 981. It's a part of Smooth Breakfast with Folu.
And with Valentine.
And this time, Lagos, to join the conversation, please send us messages through WhatsApp. The WhatsApp number 0809 444 0981. We also have in the studio Analyst, so go into details, look into details of the story. His name is Gbolahan. Welcome, Gbolahan. Good morning.
Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning, also known as Mr. G Quest up on Twitter. He's our solo warrior for this morning, but of course, Lagos, you are a part of the conversation. So please make sure you send in your comments. I have already started tweeting because the headlines are quite amusing this morning.
Yes,
so just use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981 if you use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981 if you would like to find the tweet and of course respond to the stories which we've already posted for you. You can start sending in comments as well to our WhatsApp number, which is 0809 444 0981. Do know that we are also streaming live on YouTube, so go over to youtube.com/smooth981fm Lagos if you want to watch our faces in the studio, and of course drop comments on the live stream chat as well.
Our first story is from Premium Times newspaper. Nigerian governors propose 22,500 naira minimum wage. Gbolahan. The governors of the 36 states have reported as saying that they can pay 22,500 naira as minimum wage, and they said they revealed this on Tuesday after an emergency meeting that was sat, and the chairman of the forum, Governor Abdulaziz Yari of Zamfara, gave the outcome of the meeting in a statement. Now, linking it to this next report, we also have Bayelsa state government has agreed to pay their workers in the state 30,000 naira.
Well, on the streets is what we call snitching. So I'm not really sure. What is your take on all of this? Because we also know that Labour have been very firm on their 30,000 naira stance.
Yeah.
We know that the governors, as a collective, the governors forum have been very clear as to their inability to afford it. But then Bayelsa. And also, I hear Benue, Governor Autumn, also saying, "Listen,
He's indicating
we're willing
Yeah.
to pay what you ask."
And Monday is very close.
Hey, well, you know one thing as well too. Election is very close as well too. So people are trying to gather up a lot of support as well.
Goodwill.
But and goodwill. But when you look at the article, it's very funny. And when I look at the 22,500, I mean, what's a 500 on top of it as well? Why don't you just round it up to some figure? Why just make it 500? Just a little bit of change.
See, they calculated it. Well, this is what they can afford.
Oh, gosh. it's amazing. And it says a lot when you're talking about Bayelsa State being able to afford it. And if you look back a year ago or so, Bayelsa was one of those states that was actually owing salaries as well too, even though they were probably not owing as much as places such as Osun State and some other states as well too, but they were still owing. So obviously there's a challenge with revenue generally across the country. People are having it difficult a bit, but then we should actually move our discussion of the minimum wage beyond talking about affordability. Yes, affordability is important, but that's not the only thing that we should be considering. What about the living standard? What about giving people a decent wage as well, so that they can go home with something that is meaningful as well? These are all factors that needs to be considered. What about the inflation rate as well? When was the last time that a minimum wage review was done? It was 2010, if I'm correct. I stand to be corrected there. And between 2010 to 2018, we're talking 8 years now. And you can only afford to increase their wage by about 4,500. What percentage is that?
And this is also to point out that the Labour leaders have been saying that this is the totality of the emoluments. It's not even just the basic salary. So you raised some very valid points there. What are the other benefits, perhaps, that the state is offering? And should the state governors be considering things like maybe not housing allowances, but housing provision, maybe subsidizing certain aspects of the workers' lives?
Well, you do know that most times anyway, when you're looking at the gross salary, 22,500, it's actually broken down. There's transport allowance, there's housing. So you're talking about transport
to break that down.
In 22,500. So it's wicked, if you tell me. If I must say, if governors tell you that they cannot afford this amount or they cannot afford 30,000 as minimum wage, let's look back as well to, at the start of this Labour was actually asking, or we were hearing rumors of 56,000. What they were talking about?
Yeah, that's what Labour was putting out in the universe, but no one from the government had
agreed to
played
that.
around with that number.
But in my opinion, anyway, I believe this is just a negotiating strategy. Anyway, start very low and you start to increase gradually because course, federal government had actually said 24,000 initially. So why are we now having this 22,500 now? And I think what normally happens, which is why we're seeing Bayelsa and some other states saying that, they might be able to afford that 30,000, is that a lot of people hide under the governors forum as an excuse and as a collective. It's very bizarre to me to say that all 36 governors came to a consensus and said, "Oh, we cannot afford to pay this."
Bizarre?
And this.
Why bizarre?
Why would you come? Why would it be a unanimous consensus that all 36 they come to an agreement on something?
It's been a debate for a long time, Gbolahan. So I don't think bizarre is. I don't think that's the word.
36 governors all came to an agreement that we cannot afford this in this country. All 36. Is
there not a looming strike? Have they not been wasting funds and resources for a while, which we've seen? I mean,
But do you see Labour conceding to this figure?
Well, I think this will drag on for a bit longer. I doubt Labour will concede to this.
Monday
I think the government
coming.
Well, the strike, I'm sure they would
They'll
actually
push it
come to a deadline. They'll come to an agreement before Monday or so.
And finally, do you think that this mentioned by both Bayelsa and Governor Autumn of Benue State to say that they are willing to pay, do you think that it is realistic that they will actually pay, or it's something they're saying ahead of elections?
Well, that's another thing as well that we really cannot say until we get across that bridge.
All right, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Another bridge to cross is February 16, 2019. Elections for presidential and assembly seats and Independent National Electoral Commission yesterday came out to say that it was yet to get the 189.2 billion naira approved for the exercise. Bola, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, this is not good planning, I would say. It's not good planning, not good organization. When we're looking at, we only have 108 days to the election, and you still haven't gotten the money to it for the election as well. This comes to me as like we're sabotaging INEC.
And it feels as though they're about to be blamed for elections that may not go as smoothly as they should.
Exactly. So, when you get to the election time and you're not getting the ballot papers on time, or things are not done adequately or sufficiently, then you would easily find an excuse or an escape route as well too, as that, well, we didn't get the money on time. We should have gotten this 200-300 days ago, and we still haven't gotten it. And when we look at it, it's just shoddy job, and it's not expected anyway. We should have moved beyond this point. How many years have we been conducting an election in this country? We've been conducting an election now every 4 years since 1998 or so.
But for this particular situation, do you see this as a lack of funds, available funds for this election, or just sheer delay on the part of the parties that are involved in making this happen?
189 billion. How much is 189 billion when we're looking at how much is our budget? 8 trillion naira.
Budget is not real money. It's just
it's
budget
paper,
plan.
It's paper money, and then you find the money.
Yeah, you find the money.
But the issue though is this is a direct result of bickering between presidency and executive that's been going on for a very long time. I mean, any comments on that? And how to resolve that going forward, because it seems to be the status quo for the moment, or perhaps it's this legislative that we're seeing this the most with.
Yeah, but when you have 3 different arms of government, you would expect that there will be some sort of coherence and some sort of communication, a good cordial relationship between the executives and also the legislators. But unfortunately, in this current administration, we seem not to have gotten that. They have been at loggerheads from the inception of the administration anyway, when it came to picking who the Senate president was as well too. So there's been a lot of disagreement from the onset. So it's so difficult to see them come into an agreement on things. But
we hope to move past that. Something else not probably be challenging to look beyond or move past is, on a positive note though, from Daily Times newspaper. I'll have this report here. It says Dangote investment accounts for 10% of Nigeria's GDP. Nation Nigeria. Nigeria now remains the biggest economy in Africa. The latest report revealed that the richest man in Africa's company, owns or provides for this percentage for the GDP, Gbolahan?
Nigeria has been the largest economy in Africa for about at least 3 to 4 years now or so, since the rebasing was done in 2014 or so. And this article actually says, we should be grateful to Alhaji in this country for his
Uncle Aliko, as some of us like to call him.
yes, uncle, actually.
Uncle.
Yeah, I like that, actually.
Someone graduated to Daddy Aliko.
Oh.
No, me, it's uncle. It's okay.
Uncle sounds better than Alhaji, and some sort of familiarity as well too.
At this point, he's uncle to all of us.
He's my uncle as well too. Yeah, exactly. So 10% it says here of investment is coming through from Uncle
From Dangote.
from my uncle Dangote as well too. So it says a lot about our economy as well too, that 10% is solely from one man, and we're talking about our economy. Our GDP is currently at about $400 billion at the moment now, and before the exchange rate issues that we had in 2015 and 16, we were actually at about 550 billion. And of course, because of the devaluation of the currency, now we're now talking 400 billion. And this has also affected Alhaji as well too, who was or is still the richest man in Africa.
Yes.
But at that point in time as well, he was valued at about $18 billion. But now his net worth is now at 14 billion as well too. So he's affected one way, but somehow he's managing and pulling through as well too, and investing heavily in the Nigerian economy. And he's playing in so many fields as well. So we're talking about cement, we're talking about the flour industry, we're talking about also the new petroleum refining that is coming up in Lekki as well too.
But going back to the non-oil sectors that you were talking about, I like that you mentioned it, because the National Bureau of Statistics in this same article and in an interesting report have pointed out that for the first time since we exited from a recession, our growth was driven by the non-oil sector, which grew by 2.05% and represented the strongest growth in non-oil GDP since 2015, and that's certainly something worth paying attention to.
Well, if we're talking about, so we'll give credit to the government then when we're talking about diversifying our economy and moving away from oil as well, and we're seeing some little green fields and some...
Yes, because the sectors, they say, that drove the growth in the second quarter of 2018 include telecommunications. It grew by 11.51%. Water supply and sewage, interestingly, grew by 11.98%. And broadcasting, which grew by 21.92%. But it was constrained by agriculture, that just grew 1.3% compared to a 3% in Q1 of the same year. So, interesting.
So, now, yes, I would hope, just to add, and not to sound cynical, I would hope that, Dangote is one business and one businessman, and I would hope that some other businesses in Nigeria would actually enjoy similar level playing field or enabling environment for their businesses to thrive. If one business is contributing to about 10% of the nation's GDP, imagine if all other businesses or more businesses are enjoying as much benefits. It comes as a question, not a statement.
That will be great. It will be great if we can have a lot more players. If we can have a lot more players as well too, and not have a single player who has about 60 to 70% of the market share or so in some certain industries.
Yeah, so I was going to say, are we forgetting that we just spoke about the sectors that grew our GDP as well, which were telco, all these other areas that he doesn't play in?
Oh, well, he had an indirect play in Etisalat.
Their news has not been so good, so I really don't think they were part of this. I really don't think they're part of this growth. But thank you very much for that. We've got quite a few messages coming in. Let's get into it. MI from Akoka says, we're in interesting times ahead of 2019. Labour accused the governors of hiding behind a forum not recognised by the Constitution to front an unrealistic minimum wage. Now, some governors have thought otherwise, choosing to eat pie on the dining table of what the people say, he says. Trevor knows the popping in for money easy or budget money very real. Yes, once found is basically what I was pointing out. But we've also got this in. Dele says, I'm all for a decent wage, but for workers that actually work, says Dele. Yikes. Wambuiwa says, our leader treating minimum wage as if they are pricing for more in the market. Whatever happened to proper planning and the consideration of so many other factors in coming to proper and dignified amount that would mean well to its people? They should all go to HE double hockey sticks, he says. Hell, but we can say that it's not really a cuss word.
Cruz. Cruz says 22,500 naira minimum wage. Why? Low revenue generation. I know decisions about revenue generation capabilities of companies in the private sector is not a joke, but the same rules do not apply to government leaders. CEOs and MDs take their job seriously when it's about cash flow in and out. Are government leaders joking something?
Still on minimum wage. We've got, Yinka sent in this one to say, I've said it that last. Dangote, sorry, Uncle Aliko will run our lives. But the question is, what business model does he run? Is this model worth studying as a case study? Folu, please, are you Uncle Saraki's wife's sister? No, please, I'm not related to that one. That's a different side. How come Uncle Aliko is your uncle? Because he's all of our uncle based on 10% contribution to our GDP.
Right,
Last time I checked, you are from Ibadan, and uncle is from Kano. Ogao, yes, because I'm a true Nigerian.
Wow.
So everybody can be related. So let's carry on, though. We've got lots more stories to get through. Up next, police arrest 400 Shiite protesters, according to the new Telegraph. Now, of course, we've been seeing unrest going on when it comes to the Shiites, and we've been talking about it actually, well, interestingly, both of us, from Saturday through till Monday and Tuesday, and now we're being told that there are several people who have been arrested as being members of Islamic Movement of Nigeria. There were a couple that were picked up with up to 31 patrol bombs, with them being ferried into the FCT. There's no mention in today's stories of any casualties, but we do know, unfortunately, that there will be more casualty numbers that we'll see. The complete verified numbers we don't have yet. But your thoughts on this, especially looking at the fact that some people have been picked up with weapons, people have been picked up with petrol bombs, and there appears to be an intent to cause harm, if not just to officers or law enforcement agencies, but to the wider public, by virtue of, you can't necessarily pick specific targets with a petrol bomb. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's important to start by saying that both parties should actually work and find an amicable way of settling these issues. I'm talking about the Nigerian security agencies and also the Islamic movement of Nigeria as well too.
Yes.
They need to sit down and come to a table and discuss how to resolve this issue. We cannot continue to have this escalation of insecurity happening in our capital. It's sending the wrong message to the international audiences as well too about what is going on in the country, because I saw a lot of video clips as well too of a lot of businesses being shut down and closed down because
people couldn't leave work. It was a scary situation for a lot of people in Abuja.
And there were a lot of cars in flames as well too in the areas, and I saw clips of people throwing stones at police agencies and whatnot, and the security agencies as well. So it's important to find an amicable way of settling this issue. And the problem I find with this situation is that when I look at the people that have been caught with the petrol bombs, these are young adults in their age 21, 22, 23s or so.
20s.
It says a lot as well too about what we're using what our youths are doing as well too. This is part of the insecurity challenges that we find in our country as well. You rarely would find people in their 50s and 60s doing this. So you find youths, people that should be meaningfully engaged in doing constructive things for the country are the ones that we find doing all of this.
Of course, young people tend to have a lot more energy, so it's easy to galvanize, and more importantly, it's easy to implant ideas. So let's go back and look at the antecedents of this, right? 2015, we had the horrible massacre of a number of these members. We also had the incarceration of their leader, El-Zakzaky. Let's also flash back to how the former leader of Boko Haram was incarcerated and killed in custody, or died in custody, which is what triggered Boko Haram to become the violent sect that we know of today.
Yes.
Fast forward to 2016, when a court order came out in December of 2016 to say, listen, release him. He has not been charged. He's been held for over a year, himself and his wife. And there was a specific court order giving the SSS 45 days to let go of El-Zakzaky and his wife. SSS still claiming, it's for protective custody. We fast forward to 2017, 2018. It was May of this year that he was finally formally charged with murder, forgetting the fact that hundreds of their followers had been murdered, and till now, as far as we understand it, that trial keeps getting postponed. So he's still being held, still has not really had his day in court. And now we've seen the steady escalation of violence from this group, not just from that time and not just from that area, but moving down to our federal capital territory. This is a scary time right now, and what the federal government does is really going to determine how this plays out in the next couple of months.
Absolutely will. The honors lies with both parties. Of course, the government has a fault, and so do the Islamic movement of Nigeria. Two wrongs never make a right, and then there's no way you could actually get justice by stoking the situation and creating a lot of insecurity in the country. The only way you can get justice is obviously through the legal channels as well, the court processes, and also, of course, we're coming up to an election season as well, so you can protest with your vote.
Thank you very much for that. Up next, budget fall to Osinbajo's claim on $10 billion debt stock. Just saying, well, that's not exactly accurate. A quick summary of this. What are your thoughts, Gbolahan?
Well, of course, I do agree with budget anyway on this issue, because of course, what the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has done is he's been uneconomical with the truth, actually, because of course it's been economical with the truth, actually. When we're talking about the budget, we're talking about our debt stock anyway. He was looking at it from the dollar perspective, and he was saying that we've only actually incurred 10 billion increase in our debt stock over the 3-year period. But of course, what he hasn't actually mentioned is that, of course, the debt component is actually broken into two parts. We're talking about the external and the internal debt. And while the external debt might have risen by a fraction of about 10 billion, the internal debt is actually risen beyond that. And the reason why it looks as if it's not as high in dollar terms is because of the exchange rate. Because when we're looking at the exchange rate at 199 before, and we're talking about 305 now, of course, when you take into account the dollar denomination of the local debt, then it looks smaller.
Okay. And just very quickly, when you say that the Vice President was being economical with the truth, is it quite possible that he was making these statements in reaction to the comments that tend to focus mostly on our external debt, that tend to say we're borrowing extensively from other countries? And is it not possible that that comment was really directed at those criticisms which have been widespread over the past few weeks?
Well, if that's the case, then he should have been more explicit about it. Then
about the details.
Yes, let people know. Be a little bit explicit anyway.
All right. Thank you very much for that. We keep it moving. Lagos-Ibadan rail. The federal government is berating CCECC over the slow pace of work. The Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Amechi, is saying, listen, we're trying to complete this 3-year project in 1 year. Also a cause for concern. But goes on to say, they're giving us excuses which are not excusable. China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, they are doing relatively speedy work in other areas. I believe the Belkuta areas, Ogun areas. But he says when it comes down to the Lagos, and even though we found approval for moving water pipelines and things like that, and he commends Lagos State Water Corporation for having resolved the issues, he says CCECC are still being slow.
Yes, the government should crack their whip anyway and get the contractors to hurry up with this completion. We've got an election coming up, and the president has to commission something.
Why do I sense sarcasm in that?
Well, we've been commissioning quite a lot of projects over the last 2 months now, haven't we? So
that's pretty standard pre-election process. But is it also possible that it's because this administration may not be in power moving forward, and a later administration may delay the completion of projects? Because it's a problem we have in this part of the world, where government, even though it's meant to be a continuum, each administration sometimes tends to discontinue projects, even though this administration hasn't necessarily done that.
Well, this administration has been great at completing projects that has been abandoned by the previous government. Also, it doesn't make any sense to me where you have government, successive governments just abandon projects, and it's to your glory when you complete it. Look at what has happened with the Kano at the Kaduna Abuja rail
Rail,
line,
yes.
the airport as well,
Port
to
Harcourt International
Port Harcourt International Airport. Most of all this project was actually initiated by the previous government, but who's taking the glory for it now? This current administration. So it's great if you can actually complete the project, because you spend less and you spend a lot less time as well too in taking a bit of the accolade. And yes, you might be right as well too that the reason for hurrying up the contractors might be because, of course, there's a possibility, because you can never say never anyway. Anything can happen.
But it's realistic. 3-year project to be completed in a year.
Well,
We all raised our eyebrows when they said it last year or the year before, but the time is approaching. We'll know. Let's see. I would like to catch a train to Ibadan for
It'd be
Christmas.
nice.
That would be
Very nice.
It'll be
That'd be
great.
lovely.
You don't have to drive all the way.
Okay. Hello.
You can just put your feet, relax, read a
Excellent.
newspaper or something. Fantastic.
Okay, the next story now. The President Buhari is vowing to punish perpetrators of the violence and killing in Kaduna, according to the Guardian newspaper. He visited Kaduna yesterday, assured the federal government and assured everyone that the federal government will do everything possible to punish the perpetrators of the violence and the latest killings in the state, expressing sadness at the loss of lives and property in Kasu and Magani and the unrest in the Kaduna metropolis, insisting that these killings must stop.
It's refreshing, and it's great to see our president on his feet once more, and starting to visit a lot of all these areas that there have been incidences and situations that have occurred. So it's refreshing. I'm really glad to see the president is doing this and taking action as well. Well, this is something that we've heard time and time again, that the perpetrators will be brought to book. They would be made to account for their heinous crimes. But unfortunately, this should go beyond just comments or so. We should actually see action. We should see people being arrested and then being prosecuted as well too. It's important to see that it serves as a deterrent to others as well, so that are looking at committing such crimes in the future.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. And a final bit of news, just to think of it more as public service announcements. ThisDay newspaper, the Lagos State Police Command have suspended the ongoing Operation Velvet for a period of 1 month, with effect from October 30th, to enable vehicles and motorcycle owners time to regularize their documents. Interesting. So it seems apparently that they intend to be involved in checking documentation, which in itself is going to cause more traffic. If we think about this logically, I don't understand how that's supposed to work. They say the operation was aimed at enforcing all relevant traffic laws to restore orderliness to the roads, and so they put it on hold for a period of 1 month. But then how will this help traffic if you are stopping people to check documentation during traffic
Will
hours?
that increase
I don't
traffic?
understand how that's supposed to work, because they seem to have deliberately left the information about checking documents out of the initial press release they put out.
This is beyond me as well. If you're going to be stopping vehicles in the middle of where the roads are blocked already as it is, of course you're going to be causing a lot more traffic. And we know what what happened as well with the police back from work, and there was a little bit of traffic, or only to find out that getting to the end of the road, it was actually being caused by police doing stopping and checking, and and you're thinking, I thought this has actually been stopped many years ago, and why are we having this? And that's where we're having it.
Thank you very much for that, Gbolahan. We'll round up with a few more messages. Big T says, for the Islamic movement of Nigeria, my question is this: before the initial clash with the military, during their annual march, was this group violent? No. So after killing them, arresting their leaders and such, we are surprised that they've become violent. This is deja vu of Boko Haram.
Wow. And Dele said, I knew this Operation Velvet thing was going to get back to documents checking. Typical of Nigerian police.
It just doesn't seem to make sense.
That is
Henry
our fear.
Manuel says, we could have saved ourselves the avoidable waste of lives had the president respected court orders to release the IMN leader. It's not too late to release him. Absolutely. Perhaps exile is the way to go. Perhaps that's what we should be doing.
Right. Ozzy here sent in this message. Said, my sister was stranded in a salon yesterday because of the situation in Abuja. She ran for her life. Sadly, I do not support the Shiite group with regard to their conduct for their cause, or the pursuance of their cause is lost with all this rhetoric. Most of the people in this group are young people with no work. They are being used by powerful people. She goes on to say, Operation Velvet is a way for the money for the holidays. Just saying. So it's not well thought out.
Oh dear. On that note, we're pretty much done. Latunji also does comment up on Twitter to say the Shi'ites have tried the legal channel. They've got bail for their leader. Justice has been denied them. They've remained calm in the face of injustice for 2 years. So what else can they do?
Continue to remain calm.
Thank you, Bonha. Thank you for your analysis this morning. You can find him up on Twitter at Mr. GQuest. And Lagos for a Wednesday morning. In 15 minutes, we talk sports inside the locker room. Thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Page Financials.
I survived. Thank you very much.